Hello, Leo. Avery here, and I'm going to read you the story of Rank, Shank, and Benny.
Now, whenever you hear this sound, it's time to turn the page. All right, here we go.
Once upon a time, there was a chocolate factory. But not just any chocolate factory. No, this was a Nether chocolate factory, home of the Nether chocolate bunny. Now, Mr. Nether, Nebby K. Nether, could be a little mean sometimes. He wasn't a bad man, but every now and then he'd get a little confused. Why, his chocolate bunnies were selling so well, I think he'd gotten a bit big for his britches, and that was saying something because his britches were pretty big to start out with. Mr. Nether had 3 boys working in his chocolate factory named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Of course, no one could remember those names, so we just called them Rank, Shack, and Benny. They came with some other boys and girls that Mr. Nether brought in to help make chocolate bunnies. Yep, they were away from their parents for the first time. Things were going pretty well until one day when Mr. Nether made an announcement.
This morning, Nether Chocolate shipped its 2 millionth chocolate bunny.
He said,
To celebrate this momentous occasion, for the next 30 minutes, everyone may eat as many bunnies as they want.
Well, the kids were thrilled. They loved chocolate, and now they could eat as much as they wanted. Rack and Benny started eating bunnies too. Then Shack had something to say.
I don't think we should eat any more bunnies.
He told them.
Don't you remember what our parents taught us? We shouldn't eat very much candy because it's not very good for us.
Shaq,
Rack replied.
Our parents aren't here now. We're on our own. Besides, everybody else is doing it.
Shank told him about a song his mother used to sing to him a long time ago. It was a song of always remembering the things our parents teach us.
You see,
Shank said,
even though our parents aren't here right now to help us do what's right, if we remember what they taught us, it's kind of like we are here.
well, Rank and Benny agreed not to eat any more bunnies. When Mr. Nether came in, he found everyone lying on the floor with tummy aches. Everyone except Rank, Shack, and Benny.
Everybody else is lying down.
Mr. Nether said,
But you 3 are standing up. We can use boys who know how to stand up here at Nether Chocolate. How would you like to be junior executives?
What it mean?
Benny asked,
It means you have to wear a tie.
replying Nether's helper, Mr. Lunt. The boys were very excited about their new jobs. They had done what they thought was right, even though no one else was doing it, and it paid off. But boy, were they in for a surprise when they got to Mr. Nether's office the next day. In his office, Mr. Nether told Rank, Shank, and Benny how much he loved the Nether chocolate bunny. He told them how he wanted everyone to love the bunny. So he had decided to build a giant chocolate bunny for everyone to bow down to.
This is just a model.
He told them,
The real bunny is 90 feet high.
Wow, that's a big bunny, sir.
Shack said. Mr. Nether replied,
And it's gonna be a beautiful thing when everybody bows down and sings the bunny song.
well, the bunny song was full of terrible things that Rank, Shank, and Benny knew were wrong. Mr. Nether told them that if they didn't sing it, he was going to throw them in the furnace where the bad bunnies went. What should they do? If they stand up for what they believe in now, they'll be in a heap of trouble. That afternoon, Mr. Nether brought everyone outside to meet the giant bunny.
Now it is time to bow and sing the bunny song.
He said. The music started and everyone bowed. Then Mr. Lunt noticed something.
Hey, boss, those 3 guys don't look like they're bowing.
He said. Mr. Nether took a closer look. It was Rank, Shack, and Benny.
I said it's time to sing the bunny song.
He repeated. Rack, Shack, and Benny did not sing. Their friend Laura was shocked.
Come on, guys.
She begged.
This is the boys. Everybody's doing it.
Still, Rack, Shack, and Benny did not sing. Mr. Nether shouted again.
Sing
Finally, Shaq started singing, but he wasn't singing the bunny song. No, he was singing the song his mother taught him. Rank and Benny joined in and they sang the song together. When they finished, Mr. Nazar was smiling.
Oh, that was beautiful.
He said,
I'm going to be singing that song myself. As I throw you into the furnace, God sees them. Take them to the furnace.
Laura looked on in horror as the guards dragged her friends away. What could she do? Back in the factory, Mr. Nazar put Rack, Shank, and Benny on a conveyor belt that led to the furnace. He asked them one more time,
Will you or won't you sing the song?
The boys thought hard. Then they explained to Mr. Nazar that their parents had always taught them to stand up for what they believe in. They also told him that God wanted them to do what was right, and that there was a lot of stuff in that song that was not right. That's why, even though they didn't want to get in trouble, they could not sing that song. Mr. Nazar smiled.
I understand, boys.
He said. Benny was amazed.
You do?
Oh, yes.
Mr. Nazar continued.
I understand that you're bad bunnies.
Mr. Nazar pushed a button that sent Rack, Shack, and Benny down the slide towards the furnace. Round and round they went as the glow of the furnace grew brighter. Was this the end? Suddenly, they stopped falling. They hit something, but it wasn't the furnace. Mr. Nazar turned to see what happened, and Laura's trunk rose into the air with Rack, Shack, and Benny safely inside.
Sorry, sir. Can't let you cook my body.
She yelled.
Guards, get them.
Mr. Nazar hollered. Two guards jumped into flying bunny cycles and raced off after Laura. Laura was a good driver. She led the guards into the giant pipes of the factory, twisting and turning as they raced along. One by one, she tricked the guards into going the wrong way and they fell out of the pipes and into the giant vats of chocolate below. Up ahead, they saw light streaming down the tunnel. That must be the way out. Laura followed the light and flew out of the pipe. But instead of being outside, they were right back where they started, above the furnace with Mr. Nazar smiling at them.
You're back.
He said,
Now, if I'm not mistaken, that truck belongs to me. Mr. Lunt?
Mr. Lunt pushed a button, and two giant arms grabbed Laura's truck and held it tight.
Oh, but look,
Nazar continued.
my truck seems to be full of garbage. Mr. Lunt, is there anything you can do about that?
Mr. Lunt pushed another button, and the arms began turning the truck over. He was going to dump them right into the furnace. While no one was looking, Laura jumped out of the truck and disappeared behind a pile of boxes. Rack, Shank, and Benny were now looking right down into the furnace. Shank turned to his friends with a worried look on his face.
Remember how our parents said that God would always be watching out for us?
He asked.
I sure hope they were right.
Just then, the crane's arms shut down. Mr. Nazar looked around and saw Laura standing on top of the boxes with the crane's power cord next to her and a crazy look in her eyes.
Nobody bakes my buddy.
She hollered. The boys smiled at their brave friend, but their smiles faded as the tail of the truck began bending under their weight.
Listen here, young lady.
Nazar yelled. He was interrupted by a loud crack. The tailgate had broken, and Laura and Mr. Nazar watched as Rack, Shank, and Benny disappeared into the glowing furnace.
Nobody's ever gonna stand up to me again.
Mr. Nazar laughed, but then something strange happened. A crackling noise filled the air. Mr. Nazar spun around to see light streaming down into the furnace, filling the factory with an eerie glow. Mr. Lunt hopped up to a window and looked inside. He said,
How many guys did we throw into the furnace?
Mr. Nazar was frightened. He mumbled,
Well, it looks like 4 guys in there now, and one of them's real shiny.
said Mr. Lunt. Mr. Nazar was speechless. Mr. Lunt looked back into the furnace.
One more thing, boss.
He whispered.
Hey, burn it up.
Now Mr. Nezer realized that God was taking care of Rank, Shack, and Benny, even in the fiery furnace. Quickly, he called the boys out. They hadn't gotten burned at all. Mr. Nezer apologized for trying to make them do things that they weren't supposed to do.
What was I thinking?
He said,
I must have forgot everything that my mommy taught me.
Rack, Shack, and Benny remembered one more thing that their parents taught them, that God always wants us to forgive.
We forgive you.
They said. And that's the story of Rack, Shack, and Benny. 3 boys who learned that if they stood up for what they believed in, God would stand with them. The end.